Welcome to this week's edition of the Nation's Capital Sports Show, where it's most definitely on. I'm Kevin Jeter with Afshin Banab, Vincent Charles, Chris Jerry, and Stephen Mangas. Gentlemen, we got 30 minutes of nonstop sports, so let's get started talking about what we enjoy talking about the best and the most, and that is sports in the Washington, D.C. area. Let's start out talking about those Washington Capitals. As of this broadcast, they are 4-1-2 in the Metropolitan Division. Alex Ovechkin is starting off to a rather good start. And although it's very early in this season, what is your first initial impression of head coach Barry Trotz? We'll start from the inward backwards in terms of talking about Barry Trotz, and then we'll talk about the performance of the Washington Capitals through the first 7 games. Stephen.
Well, my first impressions with Barry Trotz so far, now that we have seen a pretty decent sampling size from the preseason plus the early season, is that his offensive system is getting more shot production than previous years, which is something that's good to see. It's less of that dump and chase and a little bit more of that get something going and get shots on net, and having the defenseman involved, which has turned out so far to work pretty well for Mike Green, which is something that's nice to see considering he's not one of the stronger defensemen on the back end for the Capitals, and that's been worrisome over the last couple of years whether he could get going.
All right, Chris.
Well, it's definitely, a little bit different, you can see, offensively. However, I won't get too excited. It was interesting that the team he left, Nashville, just had their first loss last night. So right now, I think it's pretty good. But, again, 82-game season, long season.
Actually.
Yeah, a long way to go. I like not only what they're doing offensively, but defensively. They're playing really well, and I want to see Orlov come back. I think that's important along the defensive ranks, that Dmitry Orlov get himself in gear and get healthy, get back in that lineup, and really charge that defensive lineup that Washington Capitals right now are really going forward with.
Vincent.
What I like about Barry Trotz is this team, I think, is going to be a lot more explosive than the last 2 coaches. Barry Trotz had all that experience down in Nashville, and he had some pretty aggressive, explosive teams. And I also agree with Steven, the point where he's going to get the defensemen involved, moving up the ice, and trying to get them involved offensively.
And one of the things, Vincent, that you and I had a conversation off mic about was that you like the fact that Barry Trotz is not he's not an insider per se.
That's correct. He's not one of these former players, someone who had connections to the organization. So I'm really looking forward to see what he can do with the Caps.
All right, what are the things that we should watch for in this season in terms of play that you would like to see the Caps improve upon? Stephen.
I think improve upon play is definitely going to be defense if you're going to talk to the previous years. I think that's still something that needs to be improved upon a little bit, even what they've shown this season. And maybe a surprise or not too much of a surprise, but goaltending is still something that hasn't been 100% solidified, and it's an off or on kind of thing. I'd like to see that a little more consistency.
All right, we're going to let you guys jump in here and give your thoughts, and let's continue this conversation, Afshin.
It's Kevin. Stephen, I agree about Holtby. Yeah. I'm in the tank for Braden Holtby. I really think he's good. I really think he has a really bright future if they let Holtby be Holtby. Yeah. Unlike the way the past regime had him playing goal between the pipes. So hopefully that'll work out. And Mike Green, I'm on the fence about right now. Is he going to get injured again? And is this going to be a 20 to 30 game injury that he's had for the past, 4 seasons? Right. If he can stay healthy, and if Ovechkin can buy into Barry Trotz's system, then Washington Capitals may finally get beyond the second round. But like Chris said earlier, it is way too early to even think about all that. But these are points that must be taken and points that must be thought about going forward.
And the Metropolitan Division is very top-heavy and was really competitive this year. So the Washington Capitals, it would behoove them to get off to a good flying start. But like you said, Afshin, 82 games in this season. It's early on. Vincent.
The Capitals showed their priority was defense when they signed 2 defensemen free agents in the offseason. But I also agree with the goaltending. They do have the scores, but I think defense is the priority.
All right, Chris, we're going to let you have the last word on this.
Well, the last word is I agree with them. To me, goaltending, that's what I worry about. I don't want to see Holtby, jerked out of there. The lead signing has some struggles. So if the goaltending is consistent, the Capitals will be okay.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We want to remind everyone that you are watching the Nation's Capital Sports Show via Comcast 69 and Files 38. I'm Kevin Jeter, along with Afshin Banab, Vincent Charles, Chris Jerry, and Stephen Mangas. Let's continue our conversation and talking about our beloved D.C. United. D.C. United ended the regular season in the MLS with a 1-1 draw against the Montreal Impact. And Fabian Espindola scored that goal in the 86th minute for the Black and Red. That's what you want from your team, the ability to make things happen as you enter the playoffs, Chris.
Right now, they won the Eastern Conference. They sit at 59 points. So what that means is right now, in terms of points for the whole league, they're sitting behind Seattle and LA in the West. And that's important because the team that hosts the MLS Cup Championship is the one that has the most points. So DC United, what a big turnaround they had this year from being worst to basically almost being first in the whole league. A really impressive system.
All right, Afshin, we talked about this off mic too. I keep on using that phrase, but we did. One of the things in which the national press is doing, they're kind of like snubbing DC United. It's almost like they don't exist. I mean, they're looking at the other top teams in the MLS in terms of the playoff potential, or the teams that are going to the playoffs, with the exception of DC United. This could work in DC United's favor. No pressure, man. No worries, Mon.
No, no worries. And Ben Olsen will have them doing what they need to do, I believe. And it is, I think, one of the greatest turnarounds in MLS soccer history.
The greatest.
Yeah, it probably is the greatest, the way they turned it around and got 59 points. But it's not even the national media, Kevin. It's the local media. I haven't heard much locally about DC United. And of course, we're in the middle of football season. I understand that. Basketball season is just around the corner. But this is the most successful team thus far in the city, in Washington, D.C.
I was watching a national match last night in MLS, and there was no mention of DC United. That's why I mentioned it from that. But you're right. On the local level, when I watched the Comcast of the world, no disrespect, there was nothing. Iota, zero, zilch. Vincent.
Gentlemen, a historic turnaround. But I do agree that if they had that kind of a season, they certainly have a good chance in the playoffs. Especially the way Bill Hamid is playing. That guy has really come into his own as a goalkeeper this year.
That's right. So let's fast forward to the playoffs. Chris, going to ask you this question, then we're going to get to Stephen. Who are they playing, and what are their chances of advancing in the playoffs?
Well, as the number one seed, they don't know who they're playing yet. The fourth and fifth seeds will play this coming weekend, and then whoever wins that will go to a two-game aggregate. Personally, I'm hoping the New York Red Bulls win that 4-5 game because that's the traditional rivalry in the MLS between DC United and New York Red Bulls. They play for what's called the Atlantic Cup during the regular season, but I'd love to see that matchup. That's who it looks like I think they'll end up playing.
All right, Steven.
Yeah, I'd like to see the Red Bulls matchup too. A classic rivalry would be an interesting game to watch. And going back to the local coverage and everything else, I'm a little fine with it being quiet because all I know is that DC United's been one of the few major DC sports teams over the last few generations to kind of buck that DC hex of playoff victories. So hopefully they can do that again, not be a Nationals that win the East and then go down, or not be, Redskins in playoffs and out and Capitals in playoffs and out. So let's put our money on this one.
This could be the one bright spot. Yeah. Vincent's favorite word that he uses for the DC area in terms of having a winning tradition, at least with DC United, Afshin.
DC United, I think they will come out of the East. They have a really good chance to do that, to come out of the East. My worry would be, like Chris said, those two teams out west, Seattle and LA, the Galaxy and the Sounders. Really, really tough teams, especially Seattle. If you have that MLS Cup out there in Seattle, where you literally will get 40,000 fans, it'll be hard for them. But I think they can make their way out of the East and play those teams, one of those teams.
Vincent.
One match at a time. And Ben Olsen, he's done an incredible job. The national media cannot snub him as Coach of the Year.
Oh, yeah, that's a good thing. He's done a lot. What do you attribute the winning success to, Chris?
Well, Espindola is actually, I think, has been the MVP of the team because when they made the trade before the season, got Eddie Johnson, I thought that would make a difference to make them better. But Eddie, though he's come on in the last month or so, Eddie hasn't produced like I thought he would produce, and yet DC United stands on top of the East. It's just an all-around good season. I've kind of taken a shot at Dave Casper, the general manager, saying that he should have been on a train out here for a while. But, hey, give credit where it's due. The team he's assembled has ended up winning the East, so that's a good thing.
Afshin, we're going to let you have the last word on this, my man.
I mean, Chris said it all, but I think Ben Olsen is the major reason that DC United is where they are today and made that such a tremendous turnaround. And I'll give him all the credit in the world, and he should be coach of the year in MLS.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Afshin Banab, Chris Jerry, Stephen Mangas, Vincent Charles. I'm Kevin Jeter, and this is the Nation's Capital Sports Show, where it's most definitely on. Coming up, we have the football segment, the Nation's Capital High School football segment with Chris Jerry and Afshin Banab, and our very special guest, Coach Kevin Jackson, the defensive back coach of the DeMatha Stags. This and so much more on this week's edition of the Nation's Capital Sports Show, where it's most definitely on. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Nation's Capital Sports Show, our coaches segment, cozying up with my good friends Chris Jerry, and then of course Kevin Jackson in the middle of us, the defensive backfield coach of the DeMatha Stags. I'm getting ahead of myself, Kevin, I guess, right?
Just defensive back.
Let's talk about the WCAC, and specifically right now, let's talk about your DeMatha Stags. You came off a big win against Gonzaga.
Yeah, we were fortunate yesterday to get a big win over the Gonzaga Eagles at Coolidge High School yesterday. The final score was 28-20, so it was an intense game throughout all 4 quarters. But we're glad we came away with the win, and we're looking forward to Archbishop Carroll in 2 weeks.
You're 4-1 right now in your conference, correct?
Yes,
and
sir.
So, what do you think?
Yeah, we're 4-1.
4-1.
Yeah.
So you, who's a tough team in the WCAC?
Well, each week in the WCAC is really tough.
Coach speak.
No, it really is. I think we have one of the best conferences in the country. It has to be top 5, top 10 in the country. So each week playing the O'Connells, Gonzaga, Good Counsel, each week is a dogfight. And next year, St. Mary Riken from Southern Maryland, they're joining the conference, and they're blowing teams out right now. So it's going to be interesting next year when they join the conference.
You're watching the Nation's Capital Sports Show on Comcast 69, Fios 38 here at Arlington Independent Media. Coach, you said St. Mary's Riken is coming in next year?
Yeah, yes, sir.
This year, they are having one of those seasons. You think that they'll be able to match up with a lot of the WCAC next year as well?
I think St. Mary's Riken may make the playoffs next year in their first year in WCAC competition. I would not be surprised if that happened. Coach Franks, the former DeMatha coach, he's down at the school in Southern Maryland, and he's doing some really good things. We actually played them this year, and it was a really close game. So
now you have, obviously, there's the Good Counsel. Good Counsel is one of the best teams too in the WCAC.
Right.
How do you feel you would match up with them in the playoffs should you meet?
Well, the first time we played Good Counsel, we lost 21-14. But again, it was a very intense game throughout the whole entire game. We just hope we get another chance to play them, and I think it'll be another close game, and just hopefully we come out on top this time.
Well, now you said speaking, hopefully you'll get another chance to play them. Can you explain exactly how does the playoffs work in WCAC?
Okay, well, the way the playoffs works in WCAC is that there's a semifinal round and then the championship round. There's only 2 weeks of playoffs, really. The top 4 teams in the conference go to the playoffs. So right now, Good Counsel would be the number 1 seed. DeMatha, we would be the number 2 seed. And as of today, Gonzaga and Bishop McNamara would be the 3 and 4 seeds respectively.
Now, you mentioned Bishop McNamara. We're used to hearing about, of course, DeMatha, and we're used to hearing about Good Counsel being up there. But don't hear much about McNamara. What's been the key to their turnaround and all of a sudden being really good in the WCAC?
Well, last year they were a really good team. Last year they're well coached, and this year it seems like they're putting everything together. Because last year they had a really good offense, but they struggled at times with defense. This year, throughout the first couple of games, they struggled on both sides of the ball. But as we're getting closer to this playoff run, their quarterback Ramar Williams, he's really leading that team. He's a really good player. He's going to do great things in college when he goes to college next year.
Coach, let's talk about some of the players on your team now, especially on the offensive side of the ball. You've got a couple good running backs, a good quarterback on your team. Talk about them a little bit.
Yeah, we have a sophomore quarterback named Bo English, and he's really picking up in his first year as a starter at DeMatha. And we're asking him to spread the ball around and do some quite difficult things, and he's responding to that challenge. We're led by Lorenzo Harrison, our junior running back, and just verbally committed to the University of Maryland. He's a stellar running back. He has over 500 yards this season, and he missed the first 4 games because he was injured in our very first game of the year against Archbishop Wood. Then we also have Anthony McFarland at running back, and this kid has amazing speed. He's a track athlete, and I know a lot of times you hear about track athletes who play football, but he's a football player
He
that
can try
runs
out.
track. He is an incredible talent. And then we also have Daryl Turner and Tino Ellis on wide receivers, and I would take those two wide receivers or anyone in the state or
Really,
this
yeah.
area. Yeah.
You would, yeah. And of course, on the defensive side,
On the defensive,
you coach the backfield, so I know you've got some. Your heart is with them every game.
On the defensive side of the ball, we're led by one of our defensive linemen, actually, Julius. He is the defensive leader. He calls the plays in from the sideline, and that's very rare to come from a defensive lineman. So we're really impressed and proud of how Julius is playing this year. Our linebacking core is led by Jair George, which is Eddie George's son. He's our weak side linebacker, and he is a force on the edge.
Tell everybody who Eddie George is.
Oh, Eddie George. He's a Heisman Trophy winner for Ohio State at running back, and he also played in the NFL for a number of years with the Tennessee Titans and Houston Oilers before they moved.
Well, you know, one of the things that I can attest to that you pointed to is WCAC. I think it unquestioned the whole metropolitan. They're like the SEC of high school football for this area. Best. You know, I watched the very first game of the year between Gonzaga and Centerville. Centerville is probably one of the best, if not the best, in the state of Virginia, and Gonzaga pretty much handled them. And as Coach said, now Gonzaga's already lost 2 games, including the DeMatha and the WCAC. They're kind of tough. Coach, on your team, you mentioned some of your players. How many Division I athletes? I know DeMatha puts out a lot. How many Division I athletes do you think are on your team?
Well, from last year's championship team, we put 16 football players in Division I schools from last year's championship team. This year, we're very young. We have mostly sophomores and juniors playing and starting for us, with a few seniors. One of the seniors that we have starting for us is Tyler Green. He's a starting corner, but he's really good at corner and at safety, so we move him around depending on the matchup for the week. And he's already committed to Ohio State University. And so from the defense standpoint, I would probably say that's our biggest recruit. A couple of our linemen, offensive and defensive linemen, are being looked at by Alabama and teams in the SEC.
Well, that's really interesting. You know, one of the things is, as some of you out there see us, you know, if you have any comments or information, anything, emails, you can always contact us at the Nation's Capital Sports Show by sending an email to info@tncss.net.
That's right. And, of course, let's not forget about the Wilson Tigers. They did win their homecoming. My alma mater, Kevin Jeter's alma mater. Coach Jackson, we just want to present you. We know you're also a big Washington Nationals fan. So we have a Washington National beach towel. Unfortunately, you're going to have to wait a few more months before you can use it. But that is just for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being on the show, okay?
Hey, Coach, always good to talk to you, and hope the best for you guys as you go on to the playoffs.
Well, thank you all for having me. We have a bye week this week, so we're gonna allow the players to get some much needed rest, and we're getting ready for Archbishop Carroll in 2 weeks.
All right, absolutely. Thank you very much, Coach. Kevin Jackson, Chris Jerry, Afshin Banab. This is the Nation's Capital Sports Show. Back in a minute.
Welcome back to the Nation's Capital Sports Show. Afshin and Chris, great segment, man. And we thank Kevin Jackson, defensive back coach of the DeMatha Stags, for stopping by. He always gives a great information and great interview and good stuff. Way to talk about our alma mater, the Wilson Tigers winning the homecoming yesterday, man. Good stuff.
Hey, Kevin's a good guy.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you very much, Afshin and Coach. Let's talk a little bit about the Washington Redskins. When I wrote my card this morning, I was trying to figure out how many things I could say that were may have been good and worthy of at least talking about on camera. So I had to walk away from a coffee, and I came back 7 minutes later, and I came up with this. As of this broadcast, the Washington Redskins are 2-5, and they are in last place in the East Division in the NFC. Where do we begin? I mean, as you know, there are many problems on offense and defense. D'Angelo Hall and Brian Arakpo are gone for the year with season-ending injuries. And then the quarterback situation is shaping up to be interesting. Out with Kirk Cousins, in with Mr. Colt. And so as a result of this, injuries to the veterans, they have been forced to play a lot of younger players. And that's more or less not out of because they want to, but out of necessity. And wow, what a situation, Afshin.
Yeah, it's a mess that they're in, but we've seen this quite a few times.
Yeah.
Every single year, they're in the same kind of situation. To me, a lot of the issues are with the front office more than even the talent that's on the field, because the front office is the one that scouts, and they're the ones that get the talent and put them on the field. So I have a big problem with Snyder and Bruce Allen and some of those people there, even more than I do with a Colt McCoy or RG3 or Kirk Cousins or D'Angelo Hall always getting injured, and Brian Orakpo, who's got this franchise tag where he's making $1 gazillion and he's out once again. I don't know where to start.
Well, this does not hurt Brian Orakpo's. I mean, this doesn't do anything good for Brian Orakpo. He earns $11 million this year. Next year would have been the year that he would have been up for the money grab. But if he's out this year, then obviously, as of now, it looks very grim for him. Vincent.
When you talk personnel, now's the time for these young guys to step up. Guys like Spencer Long, guys like Morgan Moses, Washad Breeland, also David Amerson, second-year men. These guys have to step up and they have to perform. And we're going to find out whether the front office people have made the right decisions in these draft choices.
Well, whatever they're stuck with now is whatever they have to work with now, Stephen, because we sat here at this table at the beginning of the football season and each of us predicted 8-8 at most, and that's actually kind of generous.
Yeah, that's generous now. I thought maybe 2 games under. Now that's even kind of a scare. But, I mean, we'll see when Robert gets healthy again if something starts to turn around a little bit. But, I mean, I joked with Afshin when we talked about doing this segment. I said, you could say, what should the Redskins improve in order to improve next year? You could literally name anything across the roster, and you'd be correct. You would pretty much be correct. With aside from the wide receiver core, I think every other position, and other than running back perhaps, could pretty much be improved. And there's a few different things. The Orakpo injury definitely seems like it's going to be the end of his career in Washington, but he's one of those great physical players with physical talents that's going to get a shot somewhere.
Yeah.
But
Chris?
Well, to quote former Arizona head coach Denny Green, the Redskins are who I thought they were. I didn't really expect a lot out of them this year. Of course, I didn't expect that we would be talking, after 6 or 7 games that RG3 would again be hurt. I thought this would be the year that he'd probably finally get through it and the Redskins could be able to see if he's a guy worthy of signing to a long-term contract, and that hasn't worked out. And I think that's one of the reasons they want to rush to get him back on the field. Some people want to just give it time, but they do have to make a decision whether they're going to sign him to a larger contract to be a franchise-type player or if it's time to look for somebody else. So I'm not surprised. We all picked that the Redskins would be probably mediocre around 8-8, but right now I'm thinking they're more like about a 5-11, 6-10.
Let's talk a little bit, and Chris touched on something I want to talk about in regards to Robert Griffin III. I don't think there should be a need to really rush him back because you got next year. Well, my scenario, Afshin, was this. If Kirk Cousins would have did good, and then you had Robert Griffin III, and they're both returning to training camp, and then you let them duke it out. Well, we saw how Kirk Cousins performed, and now we have Robert Griffin III. It wouldn't hurt just to sit him back and sit him out, because what do you have to lose? I mean, no decision on his future could conceivably be made this year, at least in my humble opinion. But I kind of agree with Chris, though. I just want to stir the pot up.
Well, they did duke it out, right? Because the first game of the season, who was the starting quarterback? It was Robert Griffin III.
Yeah,
it wasn't.
But Robert Griffin III got hurt, so there wasn't really no duking out.
Right, but they did. I mean, during the preseason and training camp. So Kirk Cousins came in because of necessity, but you're right about training camp. But continue there, sir. Right. So it just goes back to, again, here we go with the same situation with him and a whole lot of other players. And then we got all these younger guys who don't have that experience, and even through training camp, and some of them play on the second team or third team, and they don't really get to play that much. And that's where we are with them. So I don't know what they're going to do about Robert Griffin III. I agree with you. I'd give him some time. I would not rush him back just to rush him back with this team at 2-5.
Let's go back to flashback 2 years ago. They were hit with a $36 million penalty against the NFL. And it seems like, Vincent, since that particular time, since they bet the farm on Robert Griffin III, they got him in, and I'm not talking bad about that. It seems like they've been playing catch-up and trying to get quality-minded players.
Yes, they have. Free agency hasn't been that great for them. They got a few decent players, but draft-wise, they did not have the players that they needed to be capable backups. We're going to find that out soon.
That's right. And so my question for you guys can go real quick as possible. Through the first 7 games of this season, what are your first initial impressions of head coach Jay Gruden? We'll start with you, Stephen.
My first impression that I've noticed really is that he really doesn't. He is the kind of coach that wants to coach his style regardless of the players that he has, and not coach to his players'
All
style.
right, very good point.
I'm
Chris.
agreeing with Steve, and that's what I've noticed about him. He's like his brother a little bit in that regard.
Afshin.
I agree too. I like that he is no nonsense. However, he is straightforward and honest. He seems to be.
And Vincent.
I think he's a delegator. He lets his coaches coach. But I also think that he didn't realize the situation. It is what it is.
Right, and it is what it is, and that's how we'll leave it at that. This is a segment in which I've thrown in 30 seconds or 40 seconds of your time. That's what it's called. I figured I would get one in since you guys get to talk about what you enjoy talking about, and I enjoy talking about that with you guys too. But this is something that really got to me a little bit until a national level, and you had to be around, and I'm quite sure you heard about the UNC debacle. And I was disappointed when I heard about the paperless debacle at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. 3,100 students were basically involved, and it's reported that half were athletes. I mean, when you look at that, I mean, that spells a total pandemonium in terms of the football program and the basketball program. Jobs were lost, and UNC disciplined a few staffers as a result of this independent report, which, by the way, was brought on by a former UNC employee who basically blew the whistle. And so, good for UNC. But you know what? There is enough blame to pass around. The faculty at UNC, the administration, and the students. You know, so I think it's a money grab. I think it's greedy when you do this. And hopefully UNC will be making strides in the inroads in regard to fixing this, because the service is done to the students, and they are the bigger losers in all of this. And so that's my segment, 30 seconds or less. If you want to chime in, info@tncss.net is our email address. You can watch the Nation's Capital Sports Show on AIM via Comcast 69 and Fios 38, Sunday at 3 p.m., Monday at 9:30 a.m., and Friday at 9:30 p.m. I like how I threw in that DJ voice for Afshin. All right, Afshin, we have a lot of people that are behind the scenes. They are the winners here, and without them, we would be nothing.
Yeah, that's right. Devin Gallagher, starts with him, our producer, and Kevin Sampson, another producer as well. So it starts with both of those gentlemen. And then, of course, Charles Smith, our director, Herbert McNair, Ken Briley, Rhonda Mendoza, and we have LJ Lacoma, Craig Syfax, Bill Weisner, and we thank each and every one of them every time we are here, because without them, like you said, I don't know where we'd be.
That's right. We'll be ghosts. We'll be out into the hemisphere and nothing. All right, I digress here. For my beloved colleagues and friends, and Afshin Bernard, Vincent Charles, Chris Jerry, and Stephen Mangas, we thank you for watching and listening to the Nation's Capital Sports Show, where you can listen to us on TuneIn.com. I'm Kevin Jeter. Have a great sporting day and a great sporting week. Take care.